In this exercise, we'll follow the instructions on page 218 and 219 of your textbook and start to look at how we could create rounded corners on elements within cascading style sheets. We're going to first focus on the menu items. Notice how the menu items are these rectangles. And we had talked earlier about this box model that creates a rectangle. So naturally, whenever you build an element in cascading style sheets, you end up with a box. And while that works in a lot of cases, by rounding some corners, you can get some stylistic advantage to your elements in your page. So we're going to look at trying to soften some of these elements up. One of the things you should keep in mind is that you've been able to do this for quite some time in style sheets, but it was pretty complicated where you'd actually have to build graphics that would simulate the curved portion of your graphics, but now it's much easier, and I'm going to show you how we can do that. One thing to keep in mind though is this is a type of manipulation of cascading style sheets that doesn't still work in all browsers that are currently in use out there. So that's one of the reasons why we have to use these WebKit and Moz prefixed rules within our style sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to lakeland.css, and we're asked to take a look at the main nav li selector. And again, keep in mind what's happening here. You've been using style sheets long enough to kind of understand this, but I want to make sure that as you go through these exercises, you're not just following what it's telling you to do in the exercise, but you're trying to get some kind of grasp on what actually is happening. This selector is the li, or the list element, within the main nav. So, and that's listed right here. We're going to go ahead and we are going to add the individual rules that are asked for in your book. And you can find those rules related to this specific selector on the top of page 219, figure 1-8. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. Before we look at it in the browser, we're going to pull up the browser again. And what I really want you to watch for here, what's happening is that we are creating what is now rectangular edges, hard edges along the right side of these navigational items. We're going to then turn them into rounded. We've already saved the document based on the changes we made in the exercise, and those changes were on step 1 and 2. And now I'm going to reload the page, and you notice now that all of these navigational items now have rounded corners. This would be a good opportunity to go back and take a look and make some changes and see how this radius dimension works. You've been reading about it, and the instructions are telling you what radius to put in there, but I think it would make a lot of sense to actually try it out for yourself by changing these numbers. Let's change them from 10 to 20. And you notice here I'm only going to change the 2 on the bottom because I'm pretty sure my browser is going to be able to accept those 2, that we don't need these special versions of the rule up above. But if in fact you wanted to show up in all browsers that was capable of doing the curved radius, you would need to make sure that you change all of these. But for now I'm just going to increase that radius size, and we're going to save it, go back to our web browser and reload it. And you see, it may have been hard to notice, but it did change the way these navigational elements look. Let's go ahead and actually make it smaller than what we had it originally. We're going to do a 5 pixel rather than a 60 that I just tried, or the 10 that's specified in your book. We'll save, and then we'll reload. And again, notice how now only the very corners are actually rounded on each of these navigational items. I'm going to go back one more time. I'm going to change this dimension to 10 as specified in your book, and then we'll watch how it changes again. Save it. The reason why I'm trying all these different sizes, I want you to do the same thing. That's really going to help you learn what's really happening, rather than just saying, well, the book told me to put in this dimension. Actually make some changes, view it, make other changes. So again, we just changed this dimension, this radius dimension, from 5 pixels to 10, and what it should do is make this curve larger. So watch what happens when I reload this. I'm going to do it right now. And now all those navigational elements have a larger radius size. Before we move on to the next step in the exercise, there's one little test that I'd like you to try in addition to what we've done so far. We'll go back to the style sheet. I'm actually going to remove the bottom radius rules. Save the style sheet. And we'll go back to the browser, and again, keep your eye on this right-hand side of the navigation bar. And what should happen is that the top radius will remain as defined, but the bottom radius will not show. It will be as if it was a rectangle still. Let's go ahead and reload this. We've defined the top right radius. We've not defined any of the other corners as having a radius dimension. Right now I'm actually going to go back to my style sheet and I will place those bottom definitions, save the file, and then reload. Now each of our navigational items have a top and bottom right radius. That's just the way it should be according to the exercise in your book. In step 4 of this exercise, we're going to start working on the footer, and that's this section down at the bottom that gives us the address and the phone number for the bed and breakfast. The book has included some code on figure 1-9 on page 219 that you'll want to include in your style sheet. The objective here is, unlike doing the top and bottom of one side, as we did with the navigation items along this left column, we're actually going to do the bottom left and the bottom right, and we're going to give little curves to those. I'm going to go to the style document, lakeland.css, and we're going to type in the code that we've been given from the book. Again, we have a couple browser specific rules, the WebKit rules, the Moz rules, and then our general rules down at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then we will look at the main page here. Again, when I reload this, keep an eye on this bottom, especially these two bottom corners. The right and left bottom corner of this nav bar should change. I'll reload right now, and now you see that those bottom corners have curves to them, or they have a radius dimension. As we had talked about earlier, we should probably take a look and see how this would change if we actually change the numbers here. I'm going to up this radius dimension from 10 to, actually let me do 50 here on both sides. And then we'll save the document and reload it. See how there's quite a bit more curve here. I'm going to try one other thing just so you can see the difference from the left and the right if we put two different dimensions. We will create the right radius as 10 and the left radius as 50. We'll save this document, reload the page, and you notice how this left side of the footer has quite a bit larger radius than the right side. And the right side is the one that's correct, at least according to the numbers in the book, the 10 pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change them both to 10. Save the style sheet, reload the page, and again, this right side is already correct. This lower right side, the curve is the right dimension. This side's a little high. When we do a reload here, it corrects it. And so now we have that footer area of the page correctly formatted according to the exercise in the book. For the final step of this exercise, we're going to actually put some curved radius dimensions on each of the four corners of the main content box. That's basically all of this white box that we have everything else put into. Kind of everything except for the background image and those items that are on top of the background image. You may remember we've identified this entire area with the box ID. So we're going to go to the actual cascading style sheet here, and then we're going to type in the rules that were provided in the book. And notice these rules are much shorter, and in fact we're going to be providing radius dimensions to all four corners, yet we need fewer rules, because what we're saying here is we're going to use shortcuts that say every radius for this element should be a specific dimension. Before this, we were trying to define specific radius points, either the upper and the lower right hand or the right and the left lower dimensions. In this case, we're saying any border radius all the way around, so all four of the corners of the box should have the same border radius. And we're going to put that to 10 as specified in the book. I'll save this document. We'll go back to the actual page, and again, keep your eye on these four white corners. We'll reload the page, and you notice all these corners now have a curved radius. What I'll do is I'm going to go back to the style sheet, and I'm going to change those dimensions. I'm going to change it up to about 80, a pretty big dimension there. Save the document, the style sheet, and then reload. Watch these corners. Watch how large they get. We'll reload, and you can see how large it gets because it's actually cutting into or slicing through the footer at the bottom. And in fact, part of the corner of the content area is showing through right down here as well. So it's a little too much. This radius is a little too large. For some purposes, it may be okay. For the sake of this exercise, we're actually going to convert that back to 10. Save the style sheet. Again, I invite you to try different measurements there. And we're going to reload this. Watch what happens to these curves. All right, if you've gotten this far in the exercise, you're ready to move on to the next exercise.